Well, good morning and welcome, everyone. Jim Brett here at the New England Council. And I hope everyone had a wonderful and peaceful Thanksgiving with your loved ones. We're pleased that so many of you, I believe we have almost 300 people who have decided to kick off the week, beginning here at the New England Council. And it's very hard to believe that December is just a few days away. Before we at the New England Town Council take a much needed breather over the holidays, we have several more virtual events in the next few weeks. On Monday, December 6th, we'll host the fourth installment of our new Inside the Corner office with our guest will be the CEO of Mass General Brigham, Dr. Ann Klibanski. On Tuesday, December 7th, I hope you'll take the time to join us for our annual membership meeting. This meeting, when we formally elect our newest board members, usually takes place during our holiday party, but again, unfortunately, it needed to be virtual this year. December 9th, we will host our annual regional energy outlook featuring Gordon Van Wheelie, the CEO of ISO New England. But today, we're very excited to be joined by a member of our region's delegation who's taken on a key leadership role on Capitol Hill this year, and that is the Assistant Speaker of the House, the Honorable Katherine Clark. And today's program is sponsored by our friends at EOS Foundation. And I am pleased to be joined by the foundation's president, Andrea Silbert, as well as her colleague, Marta Rosa. EOS is a private philanthropic foundation. There's an array of very impressive initiatives focused on such very important issues ranging from closing the women's power gap to supporting school breakfast for children throughout the Commonwealth. We're very proud to call the foundation a member of the New England Council, and we are grateful for the important work Andrea and her team are tackling. And so now, I am pleased to turn it over to Andrea to introduce our very special guest.
Okay, thank you so much, Jim, and welcome everybody. At the EOS Foundation, one of the things that we're really focusing on is both gender and racial power gaps. So when we have an opportunity to sponsor an event, we always try to focus on women and particularly women of color. So thank you for letting us sponsor our very good friend, Congresswoman Clark. As you mentioned, Jim, the Congresswoman has had basically a meteoric rise to become Assistant Speaker, a very powerful position. And I think what's so delightful is that she was elected by her colleagues to that position. And it's nice to see when somebody is rewarded for their leadership. And I took a moment to think about leadership and why, Congresswoman Clark, you are such a leader. And I think it takes a few things. We often hear that leadership, great leadership, comes from preparation and then timing. So let's think about your incredible leadership and your lifetime commitment to children, childcare, and women. So I thought I knew you a long time, but of course, you know my colleague, Marta Rosa, even longer from your work together at the Massachusetts Office of Child Care Services, going back at least 25 years. I won't even hazard a guess if it went back further because you are so young. So preparation. When this wasn't a popular issue, right? This was seen as a personal issue, a women's issue. So all this preparation and then the timing, right? And the timings come because of the pandemic, very sadly, that we realize this is a business issue. But you were there this whole time. But it's not just preparation and timing. There's fearlessness. You have to be fearless. And our Congresswoman has been incredibly fearless on many issues. I watched you sit on the House floor with John Lewis around gun safety. I watched you sit out the Trump inaugural, which was very brave. A lot of people said that wasn't the right thing to do, but you always follow your conscience. And then the final element, I think, to your great leadership is just a dogged commitment. I mean, you just don't give up. So this has all led us to this incredible moment where all of a sudden childcare is front and center. And it's really, I mean, you have had an incredible impact on this. When we first knew each other, 0 to 3, right, was, until even a year ago, 0 to 3 was not even considered important. We talked a little bit about universal childcare for 4 and 5-year-olds, but you've done that. So thank you so much for your great leadership. One last thing about the Congresswoman, that I always like to talk about people's personal family. So the Congresswoman and her husband Rodney have lived in Melrose, raised 3 children in Melrose, and are now moving to Revere, where there will be Marta's neighbors. And finally, of course, the Congresswoman and I share this connection as Middlebury moms, or called mid-moms, and both mid-rugby moms at one point in our children's career. So with that, I will turn it over to our fabulous Congresswoman, Katherine Clark.
Oh, thank you so much, Andrea. There is no women's power gap at EOS Foundation, and so glad to have you and Marta here today. I'm grateful to the entire New England Council, and especially Jim Brett, for inviting me to speak here, and really honored to join you once again. And we have a lot to talk about. The Capitol Hill report could go on for a long time, but I will give you a brief overview and talk to you about the House's work and our shared goal of making sure that families, businesses, and our entire economy emerges from this pandemic stronger and more inclusive. And this has been incredibly challenging few years. Many of us have lost loved ones, jobs, or businesses, but you are the people keeping New England and our nation's economy going through it all. And it's Washington's job to ensure that you have what you need to be safe today and have a successful tomorrow. So right now, we have an incredible opportunity to rebuild a stronger, more equitable country. And we're already seeing what's possible when we come together and invest directly in the American people. Since President Biden took office, over 5.6 million new jobs have been created, and that's at a monthly rate that is 10 times that of the previous administration. We've seen the fastest economic growth in decades, the fastest decrease in unemployment at this point in the year since the 1950s. And how have we approached meeting this moment of crisis with this moment of opportunity? It's been in 3 basic ways. First was to address the immediate crisis. In March, Congress helped pass the American Rescue Plan. This legislation reopened schools safely, distributed free vaccines, stabilized our small businesses, and cut taxes for families. As a result, here in Massachusetts, almost 70% of adults are fully vaccinated. Millions of people have received their stimulus funds, and restaurants and venues have been able to keep their doors open through grant funding. Fundamentally, the American Rescue Plan was about putting the American people first. It has aided the communities and businesses hardest hit by the pandemic and lifted up those struggling the most. It is also important to note that there was not one single vote from across the aisle for the ARP, not one. Second prong of our agenda was to make sure that we were making investments in our economy's infrastructure and turn the fabled infrastructure week into reality. Just 2 weeks ago, President Biden signed the landmark Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So much of what is in that act is what the New England Council has been calling for years. Improvements to our highways, bridges, and roads, smart investments to help us solve the climate crisis and the housing crisis. You know what's possible when we invest in the systems that keep us moving and working. And we were able to come together on a bipartisan basis to make the dream of a 21st infrastructure a reality. This new law will modernize our nation's roads and bridges, expand broadband, get lead out of our drinking water, and help address climate change by investing in electric vehicles and modernizing our electric grid. It's going to create 2 million jobs annually over the next decade, union jobs, green jobs, and most importantly, good paying jobs. And the provisions in this bill couldn't come soon enough. Since 2011, commute times have increased by 11%. And on average, each driver is paying over $600 a year in costs due to driving on roads in need of repair. So how will this impact us here in Massachusetts? We will receive over $4 billion for highway repair and $1 billion for bridge replacement and repairs. New England states will also be able to compete for $13 billion in funding through the Bridge Investment Program to repair economically significant bridges, and another $16 billion for major projects that will deliver economic benefits to our communities and businesses. Further, we are investing in public transportation options. Bay Staters who take public transportation spend an extra 53% of their time commuting. Non-white households are also twice as likely to commute via public transportation, making this an issue of racial justice as well as economic necessity. Massachusetts will receive almost $3 billion over the next 5 years to improve public transportation options, connecting suburban neighborhoods to urban jobs, and ensuring that everyone has access to opportunity, no matter their zip code. Another critical feature of this bill is the expansion of broadband. We know how necessary broadband is for Americans to do their jobs, to participate equally in school learning, to receive healthcare, and stay connected. Yet 11% of Massachusetts households don't have an internet subscription, and 137,000 Bay Staters don't have broadband coverage at all. Massachusetts will receive a minimum of $100 million to help provide broadband coverage across the state, and 19% of people in our Commonwealth will be eligible for a new benefit that will help low-income families afford the internet. And an issue dear to the New England Council, we are strengthening our higher education institutions and investing in workforce development. The bipartisan infrastructure legislation allocates $405 million in grants to colleges and universities to advance state-of-the-art transportation research and technology and develop the next generation of transportation professionals. It has $10 million in grants that will also be distributed to higher ed institutions to establish building, training, and assessment centers to educate and train building technicians and engineers on implementing modern building technologies. And I know that top of mind for many of you are our ongoing supply chain and inflation challenges. We are using the funds in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act to upgrade our nation's airports and ports to prevent the disruptions that have played a role in inflation. Decades of neglect and underinvestment in our infrastructure have left the links in our supply chain struggling to keep up with our strong economic recovery from the pandemic. The legislation invests $17 billion in port infrastructure and waterways and $25 billion in airports to address repair and maintenance backlogs, reduce congestion and emission near ports and airports, and drive electrification and other low carbon technologies. We've accomplished a lot, but we've got work ahead. And the third prong of our agenda was to make sure that we were making further investments in economic infrastructure that allow people to go to work and care for their families. President Biden and House Democrats made a promise to the American people. We would not return to the status quo, but rather we would create an economy that finally works for working families. 10 days ago, the House took a historic step toward bypassing the Build Back Better Act, legislation that includes provisions to provide expanded access to affordable home care for older adults and those with disabilities, lower healthcare costs, including Medicare coverage for hearing, and lowering prescription drug prices, historic investments to combat the climate crisis, an extension of the largest tax cut for families in US history, $150 billion investment in housing and affordable housing, and funding to support higher ed and workforce development, including increasing Pell Grant awards and expanding Pell Grant eligibility to DACA recipients. And the Build Back Better Act will help keep us competitive. It is funding to help local manufacturers adopt best practices, build and train a workforce, and identify and resolve supply chain gaps. And there's a 25% tax credit for investments in US semiconductor manufacturing, including manufacturing equipment and the construction of semiconductor manufacturing facilities. So we can boost our domestic supply of semiconductors, which is critical, not only to improving our supply chain, but to our national security. And an issue that I am so grateful to the New England Council for their partnership on is making the economic case for childcare. Nothing prepares our nation better for global competition than Build Back Better Act's investment in childcare. Other countries invest an average of $14,000 a year in toddler care. Here in the US, we average $500 a year. And for years, our system has been at a breaking point. And the pandemic made it very clear that as a country, we are failing to value and support working families. And that in turn is taking a huge economic toll. But the spotlight on this issue also created a window of opportunity to fundamentally change the way we view, fund the care economy. Let's look at the facts. Women are leaving the workforce in unprecedented numbers because they can't meet their childcare and elder care needs while they're at the office. There is a shortage of caregivers because they often can't afford to care for their own families while providing care for ours. It is not just unacceptable, it is sabotaging our economic resurgence. The life-changing investments in the Build Back Better Act will stimulate the economy by ensuring women can re-enter the workforce and improving wages for essential care workers. This act will ensure that no family, low and middle income family, will pay more than 7% of their income on high quality childcare, saving the average family $8,000 a year. It will also provide universal pre-kindergarten for all 3 and 4-year-olds. And it extends the key tax cuts in the American Rescue Plan that benefit lower and middle income workers and families, including the child tax credit, the earned income tax credit, and the child independent care tax credit. These are long-term solutions we need, not just to rebuild, but to actually create a more resilient and competitive American economy. Together, these 2 bills, the Infrastructure and Jobs Act and the Build Back Better Act, will infuse our economy with opportunity by creating jobs, lowering costs and taxes, and investing directly in working families. So we have much to celebrate in what we've been able to accomplish, but we have a critical piece of unfinished business, and that's protecting the right to vote. And I just want to update you that we are currently working with Senator Joe Manchin and the Senate to move forward the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the For the People Act. These are critical pieces of legislation as we move into the midterm elections. And we cannot continue to allow a rule of the Senate in the filibuster to potentially block such critical legislation. So we stand committed in the House to tackling long-standing inequities, to lift up working families and revitalize our economy in the face of this pandemic. This is the moment to come back stronger. And I am confident we have set the blueprint to do that. And I am so grateful for everyone on this call, everyone with the New England Council, for your partnership and your commitment to keep New England growing and thriving. You really are inspirational, and your feedback and input into these bills and the work we're doing on Capitol Hill has been instrumental. So thank you for having me. Thank you for your commitment, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. And Marty, you have the first question.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much, Jim. And thank you, Representative Clark. We are so grateful for your leadership and your friendship. It's great to have a conversation with you today. And as you mentioned, the health crisis highlighted how critical and integral the early education and care sector is to our economy. It just does, the economy doesn't function without it. Managers saw babies joining work Zooms for the first time. Women quit their jobs due to lack of childcare. Immigrant communities, especially friend and neighbor care. We need more leadership from the business community to step up efforts. So I want to take us there for a minute. We know government can't solve it alone. Government's been putting in, parents have been putting in, businesses, some have been putting in as well to this issue. From where you sit, what can the business community do to support working women who carry most of the responsibility for young children and families, including elder care and other types of care? How can the business community implement government efforts? And lastly, how do we make sure that women's voices are heard within all of these efforts? And we are so blessed to have you in Congress right now. Your leadership is integral to this process. Some businesses as well as government leaders, though, seem to be tone deaf to the situation. So what can we do from your perspective?
Well, Marta, thank you so much. And I really just want to thank you for being an incredible mentor and partner in this work, and always being such a leading voice in New England and certainly in Massachusetts for what it means when we tackle this issue, what it means to our economy when we are doing what the Build Back Better Act does, which is look at it from both sides. This is an issue about parents, but primarily women, where we know the decisions around childcare and caring for other family members falls on their shoulders. And it's also about the women who provide this care that are overwhelmingly women and women of color, and who often are making poverty wages for the critical work that they're doing. So this bill lifts up both of those and also puts in some other key pieces like the paid leave policies that are so important to making all of this work. It all sort of intersects and builds on one another. And I have to say that from our conversation last June and from before that, New England Council has been such a critical partner. And it is so important that we continue to hear from the business community. We have passed this bill through the House, but we still have a Senate to go. And it is, as everyone knows, couldn't be closer margins than dead even in the Senate. And so making sure that our voices are heard as we go into this process, that this is truly a paradigm shift on how we view the care agenda as essential infrastructure, as critical as any road or bridge to getting people to work and participating in our economy. Over, your voice in the business community couldn't be more important over the next few weeks as we are fighting to preserve the funding that we do have coming out of the House. So it's not time quite yet to get your well-deserved rest that Jim mentioned at the top. We really do need to hear those voices. And I can tell you that having some more unlikely partners like the National Chamber of Commerce step forward and say, now is the time to make these investments in childcare. Now is the time to make universal pre-K a reality, are critical. And they really have been instrumental in helping us preserve that funding as the bill got narrowed through the House program. So more of the same.
More of the same. And what's our timeline, Katherine?
Well, I would never really want to speculate on the Senate's timeline, but we have had Leader Schumer say that he would like to have this done before the holiday break. So hopefully December.
Excellent. Thank you.
Congresswoman, I refer you to an article that Andrea had published in the BBJ just recently, and she talked about the McKinsey 2020 report that said women drop out of the workforce at a rate 4 times faster than men. So I think that's just another bullet point argument on why we need the child care legislation. But my question is, I know that you passed your colleagues 10 days ago, the Build Back the Better bill, but we all know now that it's in the Senate, it's going to be slimmer. And my question is, if Senator Manchin is, and all indications and all news reports says that he would like to look at the climate change language and the amount of money, he thinks there's a little too much there, so he may make some changes around the edges. The paid family leave, he doesn't think is necessary in that bill. And he also has a concern about immigration. Bernie Sanders is also talking about the SALT and the state and local tax provision that is capped at 10,000, but now going to as high as 80,000. He is saying, no, we're gonna make changes there. My question to you is, if these changes occur, the slimmer bill, that it's going to be less money in climate change, no immigration language, the paid family leave will be wiped out, and also SALT and state and local taxes may also be revised. Will you lose votes in the House?
We are in the middle of the negotiation process, but I can tell you this, we are so committed to getting this done. And we know there'll be changes. I think there'll be some changes that we will see expansion of certain programs, and we are bound to see contraction as well. And we know that we have to, as you said, please Joe Manchin and Bernie Sanders. But let me tell you this, every single Democrat is at the negotiating table, and people want to get to yes. And, it did pass the House, and but we only have a margin of 3. And, I think that speaks volumes about how Democrats are stepping up to meet this moment. And what we are seeing on the other side is a void of leadership. There's been more discussion in the House and the Republican caucus about punishing those who voted for the bipartisan infrastructure bill in the House, 13 Congress representatives. And this is a bill that Mitch McConnell supported, but that's where the focus is. So we know this is going to be hard. This is not a bill that any one of us would have written, but that's the point of having a legislative process. And it is the commitment of the House to producing results, not just talking about what we'd like to do, but actually bringing these bills to reality so that the American people can get the relief they need. Because while all the underpinnings of the economy's recovery are there, families are still struggling. And, people are not fully back to work. People are wrestling with high prices at the pump. I'm hearing a lot of concern about LIHEAP and what home heating oil and gas is going to cost this winter. These are real concerns, and so much of our economy is how we're feeling about it. And so let's take this opportunity, just as the House did, and I'm sure we'll do it again with what comes back from the Senate, to tell the American people we see them and we're working for them. And I am very confident that the House will deliver.
Mhm. So there really are no deal breakers for you or your House colleagues on this bill. Everything is on the table. We want a bill, basically, is what you're saying, and we want it signed into law and to sell all the good things in the bill to the public. That there's not going to be a last minute, oh my gosh, we lost this provision. There's no way we're going to support this.
Yeah, you got
Okay.
it. I'm going to take
Okay.
you on the road, Jim.
Okay.
You got it. You know,
All right.
I mean, it's sort of an awkward title, but we truly
Right.
are about building back better, and
Okay.
let's get it done, and we each have our priorities that we're going to
Exactly.
fight like mad for, but I am really confident that we're going to meet this moment.
Yeah. And do you feel pretty good? And you already indicated, you feel pretty good that this bill will probably pass by Christmas. I mean, there was talk that Senator Manchin again has said, slow it down, let's go into the new year. But you feel pretty good with your conversations with the senators that this bill is going to be passed by Christmas. We're going home with a bill.
I know that's the goal of Senator Schumer. And, I think one thing that's important to remember about this bill is so much of this has been pre-agreed to. So a lot, we tried to what we call pre-conference this bill as much as possible. Not everything. There are obvious areas, some that you mentioned, paid leave, immigration, Medicare expanded benefits. We expanded it to hearing. We know that Senator Sanders wants more, and maybe Joe Manchin wants less. But there is so much in this bill that we can deliver for American families who are feeling there's so much anxiety around this pandemic and people's place in our economy moving forward. And I think that this bill is saying directly to them that we understand what you're talking about around your kitchen table, what's keeping you awake at night when you think about the future for your kids and grandkids. And these bills are just not only great for this moment, but great for also meeting this moment of equity and of climate justice. And really this point in our American history. Our speaker is very fond of quoting Thomas Paine and saying the times have found us, and the times have found us. And all of us certainly didn't anticipate or ever want to be living in such turbulence with this pandemic. But this is also a time where we can really look at what builds a strong economy and make sure we're putting those pillars of that economy in place for the American people.
Right. I mean, you have a busy week coming up. On Friday, the latest CR, the continuing resolution, will expire. And I guess the government will face another possible shutdown. So what's the next strategy to avoid, a fiscal disaster, to say the least? And are you confident that the powers to be will get together and continue to fund the government? Will you also continue working to get all of your appropriation bills, and either 12 of them, through this session, or will it be a omnibus spending bill? What can we look forward to?
Yeah, well, I can tell you this, we are not going to let the government shut down. That is just a fundamental responsibility. And I am hoping that we're going to get some cooperation from Senate Republicans in meeting these fundamental financial responsibilities for our country. One is to fund our government, and the second is to address our debt ceiling. And these two issues are, going to be very much, this one by Friday, and the other one, some talk in the next few weeks, we are going to have to address. So as a member of the Appropriations Committee, I'm very proud of the bills we put together. I'd love to see them enacted. There's so much in here for Massachusetts and for New England, whether it's pandemic response, cutting edge investments in medical grants, future public health challenges, making sure we are funding that, our election infrastructure, federal student aid, investments in high poverty schools. The list goes on and on. And these are, I wish that the Senate would do the full appropriations process, and that Senate Republicans would come and join us in making sure that we don't just do another CR, but that we really look at the needs of our country right now and come up with a budget that addresses that. So we will see. I trust in Rosa DeLauro, and I know she's, we are definitely not going to have a shutdown, but where that temporary CR takes us will determine this week.
What else will you be working on for the next 3 weeks? You indicated, obviously, all the focus is going to be Build Back, the better bill. You mentioned the voting rights bill. Is there anything else on the legislative calendar that you could tell us about in the next 3 weeks that you hope will see the light of day?
Well, that's quite a lot, but just to go back for a second to the voting rights, what we're seeing across this country is so dangerous, that we're seeing this erosion of protections for voting rights. Very, very calculated attacks, especially on communities of color across the country. Over 260 bills proposed in state legislatures around the country to restrict that right to vote. And we all have a stake in this, whether you are Republican, Independent, or Democrat, in making sure that people's voices are heard. And these bills couldn't be more important as we look at the erosion of voting rights. And in a redistricting year, we know what's on the line come the midterms, and we have to make sure that we get this done. So I am heartened by the bill that Joe Manchin has put together. It really is a good piece of legislation, and it builds on work that he's done in the past, whether as Secretary of State or Governor of West Virginia. There is a commitment to voting rights there, and I hope that as we put the Build Back Better Act to a final vote and on the president's desk, that we can really focus on making sure that we get these critical voting rights packages over the line.
I have a question here on education. Someone wanted to thank you for your support of the Pell Grants. But as you know, it's the 50th anniversary of the grant is coming up next year. Is there any support in your committee about increasing the funding on the occasion of that anniversary? We know there's money in already, the Build Back. I think it's, a significant amount of money has been put in there for the Pell funding, but is there any talk about making this even bigger and bolder, as some of your colleagues have indicated about this Build Back, for next year, for the 50th anniversary?
Well, I think that's a great idea. I'm always about more Pell Grants and more access as we look at, $1.73 trillion in student loan debt and the drag that puts on our economy, our students, and our families. And so I think that Pell Grants is one of the ways that we can really help students access higher ed that is affordable to them. And, you know, we've had some great success with making Pell Grants year round, and we have to continue to make that investment in our students. So this is an area we have many passionate appropriators on, and as well as members on the education committee. So I think we can use this 50th anniversary to give a nice further boost.
That's great. After all, the Pell Grant is founded by a New Englander.
That's
So we gotta
right.
keep the tradition alive. We have a question here from the Greater Boston Food Bank that you've been very, very good to and a great advocate for. We're very grateful for the passage of the Build Back Better Act that will mitigate many of the issues that are causing food insecurity. How can food security organizations work most effectively with cross-sector partners to emphasize the business imperative of addressing food insecurity and its negative health consequences?
Yeah, I just a special shout out to everyone on this call in the New England Council who helps with this issue. It has just been heartbreaking to see the rise of food insecurity and hunger in Massachusetts, and especially the kids. You know, we have to do better than letting kids go to sleep, go to school, try to study hungry. And, you know, it has been heartbreaking to visit different food banks during the pandemic and not only see so many families and kids, but also our veterans lining up for hours trying to just get enough to eat. So the work that all of you have done to address this issue to long before the pandemic, but certainly stepping up in the pandemic to make sure that no one goes hungry in Massachusetts and in our country is incredible. So the American Rescue Plan had a big investment in the Emergency Food Assistance Program. And the Build Back Better Act has another $10 billion for the Child Nutrition Program. And we have to continue to keep our dialogue open about what you need. What is the best way that we can partner with the incredible work being done on the ground and in our communities as we go forward? So it is definitely a focus in the Build Back Better Act, but we also, as we go rapidly into the next appropriation season, I hope you will stay in touch and consider me a partner in this. It's just a critical issue that, you know, people can't work, they can't study if they don't have the food they need. And it's just such a basic life right to be able to have that, and something that we should make sure nobody in New England or in our country faces hunger in the way that people are right now.
Well, your advocacy and the advocacy of Congressman Jim McGovern have really elevated the discussion about food insecurity. In particular, there were statistics out some time ago that 20% of children go to bed at night here in the Commonwealth hungry. So, I mean, that has been a red flag for all of us in the business community to say more needs to be done on that. And you by your advocacy have elevated that discussion, but you've also put money in, you know, Build Back Better to address, you know, some of these issues. So.
And it was at New England Council, you know, going back quite a few years now, that I remember meeting with the higher ed committee, and they brought this issue to me about how homelessness and food insecurity on our campuses were a huge issue way before that had sort of permeated the media. And it's really that connection with the New England Council and the experiences and your insights into what is driving problems and solutions that is so helpful in putting this together.
In my side job, I'm a manager of a food bank in Dorchester. And let me tell you, the need is great. And we
Yeah.
We opened at 9 a.m. and at 7 a.m. they're in line. So, I mean, we need
Yeah.
that additional funding, but we thank you for that. Democrats released an updated spending bill language, which included newly agreed to language on drug pricing reform. Congress has been working on prescription drug pricing legislation in language for quite some time now. While there is still work to be done in the Senate, do you think we're close to reaching an agreement?
I do. I do. This is a vital part of the Build Back Better Act, and reducing the costs of prescription drugs is absolutely critical. One of the provisions that I am hearing so much about that people are truly excited about is the cap on insulin at $25 a month. There are so many people in our communities that have diabetes, that manage diabetes in their lives, and to have that cost be restricted is going to really be so important to families and to patients moving forward. But capping out of I think I said the wrong thing, $35 a month, not 25. But capping out-of-pocket spending for Medicare Part D for seniors will also be capped at $2,000 a year. And, this was a highly negotiated portion of this, and we'll see where it comes out. But we are also aware of, we want to do both things. We want to invest in innovation. We want to make sure that my district and the Commonwealth remain leaders. And we know that there's an ecosystem of innovation in Massachusetts that puts us on a leadership on a global level. And we want to do that. And at the same time, we want to be sure that we are reducing costs for consumers and that people aren't choosing between medication and food or paying a heating bill or a rent payment. And so, we are committed to this. It's another sort of one of those issues that I've been amazed that, we have seen complete resistance to from my Republican colleagues, because I know they hear the same stories that I do from folks at home. So I know we're going to get there. And I think that it's been a tough negotiation, but it's part of reducing healthcare costs. And there are so many reductions within this bill that are really going to be helpful to people at home. And I just got to give a shout out for the Medicaid expansion dollars that will expand access to the ACA for people living in those states whose governors made a political decision not to accept Medicaid expansion. So therefore cutting off so many people in their states. In Texas alone, this will be between 2 to 3 million people who will now be able to have access to health insurance.
I want you to look into your crystal ball and give me a date when, once again, at least the House side of the Capitol will be open to visitors.
Well, that would, my crystal ball may not be that clear today on that, but we look forward to it. January 6th was, it was just one of those days that will just live in infamy in our country's history. And we have to make sure that not only are members safe, but our incredible staff who work there and who are just this silent engine of democracy. And we have to make sure that they are able to do their jobs, feel secure, and know that they can come and be safe at work. I also think it's really important that the Capitol reopen and that people are able to walk those halls. It's the people's house, and we love to have people there. And it is sad to see very, empty galleries and and not see the tours of especially the school kids from around the country coming to learn about their capital, their government, and their history. And so as soon as we can strike that balance correctly between security and COVID, you know, I hope that we can get it reopened.
I'm being very selfish in asking the question because, as you know, every spring we bring down 300 New Englanders to meet and greet and to hear from elected officials like yourself. So we're hoping that in May that we will be welcomed to the United States Capitol. So whatever
I
you
hope
can
so
do,
too.
yeah, whatever you can do. Let me just ask you two quick questions because I know the time has come to an end, but a little over 30 days, we'll be in the second session of the 117th Congress. Do you have some legislative priorities of yours that you would like to advocate on behalf?
Oh, yes. I mean, we're moving right into appropriations, and we're going to keep building on the wins that we have. And, you know, we know that Build Back Better, the infrastructure bill, the American Rescue Plan, do a lot, but there's a lot left to be done. And I just refiled my Be Heard Act, which is putting protections in to make sure that every workplace is free from harassment and violence, and gives every worker the right to go to work and have a respectful environment. So I'm very excited about that. We continue to work on safety on the internet as well. And, you know, really looking forward to appropriations, which will be here before we know it, and getting to continue to build and develop on the work that we've been able to do this fall. So I'm sure I'll be hearing from you. I hope I will be. And we really look forward to finishing out this session next year.
The last question is on politics. As you know, that history shows us that midterm elections have not been kind to the party in power. Republicans are already making claims that they're going to take back the House in 2022. And I think they're thinking that this could be 1994, could be 2010. As you have already indicated, you already have a slim majority, about 3 votes. So what is the concern? Is there, if there is concern among leadership and the rank and file members about the midterm elections?
Well, first of all, I'll say this. Yes, that is the history, that when there's, you know, one party has control of House, Senate, White House, they tend not to have a very good midterms, but we're not in regular times. And I think the contrast between what the Democrats are standing for and the Republicans couldn't be clearer. You know, we are coming to the table and saying, let's get your schools open, get vaccines to everyone in every community. Let's make sure that your restaurant or small theater can stay open and thrive. How many votes did we have for that? 0. Then we had a smattering for roads and bridges, for traditional infrastructure in the House, 13 votes. But overwhelmingly, House Republicans said, we're not interested. We're not interested in expanding broadband. We're not interested in fixing roads and bridges. We're not interested in making sure that everyone in this country has clean drinking water and getting the lead out. I represent Malden, Massachusetts. It's where I'm sitting right now. Has one of the highest rates of lead pipes in the country and the highest in the Commonwealth. Let's help them with the work they've already started in getting those pipes out. Republicans are saying, we don't care. And then we come to the Build Back Better Act. Not a single Republican vote for saying childcare matters, for saying that we don't think it's right that families have to sell the family home and every asset of their parents in order to afford care, when what people really want is to live with dignity at home. You know, that they don't think families deserve paid leave They don't think we should be addressing the climate crisis. There is recently a symposium over at the Kennedy School talking about how this is the #1 national security threat. As we see crop failures, water scarcity, the violence, wars, diplomacy, it is all going to be challenged by the climate crisis. Never mind the economic underpinnings of this recovery and the future we're leaving for children. Republicans are saying, nope, let's not invest in modernizing our electric grid, in putting in electric vehicles, in meeting emission standards by 2030. So I will take that pitch to the American people any day. And that's exactly what we're going to show them, that we saw their problems, we know the issues, we feel the disconnect and the anxiety they have, and we're providing solutions. While Republicans have decided to just lead with obstruction that leaves the American people out of anything on Capitol Hill.
Great. Well, I want to thank you, Congresswoman, for spending time with us and keeping us all informed. I also want to thank Andrea Silbert and Mata Rosa and for arranging today's program. And to all of the people, well over 300 that have tuned in to the New England Council Congressional Forum today. I want to thank you and hope all of you have a great day. And again, thank you for the support that you give to the New England Council. And Congresswoman, you've been great to all of us here at the council, always accessible, always approachable. And we look forward, again, working with you the next 3 weeks and in the second session of the 117th Congress. Yes, we'll have many suggestions for you.
I hope so.
All in all, you've been a great advocate for New England, and we're very fortunate to have you part of the delegation.
Thanks so much, Jim. So good to be with you. Hope everyone is safe and have a wonderful holiday.
Great. Thank you. And thank you again to Andrea and to Marta. Have a great day.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.